my daughter's wedding, she left me in the kitchen with the staff. Then I heard her whisper, "Better keep her away so she doesn't ruin the photos." If you're here right now, I'm glad you found this story. Stay with me until the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story travels. I never imagined that my daughter's wedding would be the moment I finally understood where I stood in her life. I was standing in the corner of the grand kitchen at the Bellamy Hotel, smoothing down the navy blue silk dress I'd spent weeks choosing. Simple, elegant, with small pearls along the neckline. Nothing too eye-catching. I didn't want to take any attention away from Claire. I never did. "Mrs. Thompson, would you like some water?" one of the staff asked kindly. His eyes carried something I didn't want to see. Pity. "No, thank you, dear," I said with a small smile. "I'm just taking a short break from all the excitement." That wasn't true. I hadn't chosen to stay in the kitchen. I'd been guided there, gently but firmly. "Mrs. Wilson, perhaps you'd be more comfortable waiting here until the photos are finished," said the wedding planner Claire had hired, avoiding my eyes. At first, I thought they just needed some special shots with the bridal party. So I nodded and followed her into the kitchen, where the chefs were busy preparing the 5-course meal I'd paid for. That was 3 hours ago. When the kitchen doors swung open, I straightened, hoping someone had come to bring me back to the celebration. But it was Claire herself, glowing in her designer gown, the one that cost more than my first home. She didn't see me right away, too busy giving orders to the catering manager. "And make sure the champagne fountain's running before the cake cutting," she said in a tone that was calm, controlled, nothing like the gentle girl she used to be. Then she saw me. A flicker, annoyance maybe, crossed her face before she forced a smile. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Her voice sounded strained, as if I'd wandered somewhere I shouldn't have. "I was told to wait here," I replied quietly. "Is it time for family photos?" Claire glanced toward the door, fidgeting. "About that. We're running behind schedule. Jason's family is huge. The photographer suggested we limit the formal shots to immediate family." I blinked. "But I am immediate family, Claire. I'm your mother." "Yes, of course." She sighed, her eyes darting toward the ballroom. "It's just, Jason's parents have a certain vision for the album, and his mother thinks—" The door opened again. "Claire, we're ready for the family shots," the photographer's assistant called. Claire nodded quickly. "Coming." Then she turned back to me with a tight smile. "Just wait here a little longer, Mom. Enjoy some quiet time. You know how overwhelming these events can be at your age." My age? I was 68, not exactly ancient, but before I could respond, she was already walking away. At the doorway, the assistant leaned closer and whispered, "Is that her? The one you mentioned?" Claire gave a quick nod and murmured something I wasn't meant to hear, but the kitchen had gone silent. Every word carried clearly through the air. "Yes, that's my mother. It's better if she stays out of the photos. She doesn't really fit the aesthetic we're going for. Just make sure she stays occupied in here." The door closed behind them, but her words, they stayed, cutting deeper than any knife in that kitchen ever could. For a moment, I couldn't move. All those months of planning, the endless checks I'd written, the way I'd dipped into my retirement fund to give her the wedding of her dreams, none of it mattered. To her, I was just a detail to be managed. A name on a bill. With trembling hands, I opened my purse and pulled out the bank statement showing the $42,150 transfer, the final payment for the wedding. I'd planned to show it to Claire later, not to ask for gratitude, but just to let her know how much I'd tried to give her everything she wanted. Now that paper only proved one thing: how foolish I'd been. I walked out of the kitchen, past the sympathetic eyes of the staff who had heard everything. Through the quiet service hall, I stepped into the grand ballroom, where crystal chandeliers glittered above laughing guests. No one noticed me as I slipped along the wall toward the gift table. I placed the bank statement in an envelope, wrote Claire on the front, and set it gently on top of the elegant pile of presents. Then, with one last look at my beautiful daughter, smiling beside her new husband and his family as the camera flashed, I turned and walked out of the hotel into the cool evening air. No one noticed me leave. Only then did I finally let the tears fall. The house was silent when I got home. No leftover cake, no congratulatory flowers, no sign that my only child had just been married. Just emptiness and the slow ticking of the old grandfather clock that had once belonged to Claire's father. I slipped off my navy pumps, the ones I'd bought to match my dress, and sank into the darkness of my living room. The gown I'd been so proud of now felt like a costume, something I'd worn in a play where I had never understood my true part. For 3 weeks after the wedding, I heard nothing from Claire. No thank you call, no acknowledgement of the money, not even a short message to say they'd returned safely from their honeymoon in Bali, a trip I'd also paid for with what was left of my savings. The silence hurt more than her words that day. Each morning, I woke expecting to hear from her, to receive some explanation, maybe even an apology. And each night, I went to bed with that hope still unmet. She's just settling into married life, I told myself the first week. The honeymoon must have been extended, I reasoned during the second. By the third week, even I had run out of excuses. Then one Tuesday morning, as I was watering the petunias on my porch, the same flowers Claire used to say reminded her of childhood, my phone finally rang. Her ringtone. My heart leapt. I almost dropped the watering can in my hurry to answer. "Claire, how are you, sweetheart? How was the honeymoon?" "It was fine," she said, her tone distant, polite, no warmth, no excitement. "Mom, we need to talk about what you did at the wedding." The watering can slipped from my fingers, splashing across my slippers. "What I did?" "The bank statement," she said sharply. "You left it on the gift table for everyone to see. Jason's parents saw it. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? They think I made you pay for everything." "But you did," I said softly before I could stop myself. "That's not the point," Claire snapped. "It was supposed to be private. You humiliated me on my wedding day." I sank onto the porch swing, the weight of her words pressing down. "I didn't mean to embarrass you, Claire. I only left it there so you'd have it for your records. You could have mailed it, or given it to me privately. But no, you had to make a statement. Just like in high school when you came to parents' night in that awful homemade dress because you refused to borrow money for a proper one." The memory stung. I had stayed up 3 nights sewing that dress, wanting to look nice for her school event after her father passed, when money was tight and hope was all we had left. She'd been so ashamed of me that night, walking ahead, pretending we weren't together, just like at her wedding. "I'm sorry the bank statement upset you," I said finally, trying to keep my voice calm. "But I'm also sorry that you had me wait in the kitchen during your wedding, that you told the photographer to keep me out of the photos." There was a long pause on the line. "You heard that?" Claire asked, her voice suddenly softer. "Yes." Another silence. Then she sighed. "Well, you have to understand, Mom. The photos were very important to Jason's family. They're going to display them at their summer home and I don't fit the aesthetic," I finished quietly, repeating her own words from that night. "That's not... I didn't mean..." she stammered, then sighed again, frustrated. "Look, you're making this about you, and it's not. It was my wedding day." "A wedding day I paid for," I reminded her gently. "And now you're throwing that in my face?" Her voice rose again. "This is exactly why Jason thought it was better if you weren't too involved. You always have to remind everyone of your sacrifices." My throat tightened. "When have I ever done that, Claire? When have I ever asked for anything in return?" "It's not what you say, Mom. It's how you are," she said coldly. "That look, those sad eyes, like you're silently reminding everyone of what you gave up." Her words hit harder than anything before. Was that how she really saw me? A burden? A shadow of guilt? I thought of the double shifts after her father's passing, the nights I spent cleaning hospital rooms so she could stay in her private school with her friends, the vacations I never took, the dreams I quietly put aside, all to make sure she never felt she lacked anything. Had my love somehow turned into something she resented? "I think we both need some time to cool off," I whispered. Fine, she said curtly. Jason and I are hosting a small dinner next weekend to show the wedding photos. His parents are coming. I'll let you know if we decide to extend the guest list. The call ended before I could reply. I sat there on the porch, surrounded by the flowers that only I seemed to remember were her childhood favorites. The sun dipped low behind the trees, and the quiet returned. The same quiet that had filled my house since the day of her wedding. That evening, I finally did something I'd been avoiding since it all began. That night, I did something I'd promised Claire I would never do. I opened her social media page. She'd always said, "Mom, please don't comment, it's embarrassing." But I needed to see. I needed to know. There they were, hundreds of photos from the wedding. Claire and Jason, Claire with his parents, Claire with her bridesmaids, Claire laughing with Jason's family, even Claire dancing with Jason's father. Not one photo of me, not a single trace that I'd even been there. In an album titled Our Perfect Day, I had been completely erased. I scrolled through the comments. Such a beautiful family. You all look perfect together. Each word struck like a quiet confirmation of what I already knew. This hadn't been a mistake made in the moment. It had been intentional, planned. My daughter had carefully rewritten her story, keeping the part she wanted and cutting out the part that didn't fit her new image. Me. I closed the laptop and walked to my bedroom, to the old closet where I kept Claire's childhood memories, her report cards, drawings, and the stories she wrote in grade school where I was always the hero. One was written in bright crayon, "My mom is my best friend." When had that changed? When had I gone from beloved mother to unwanted reminder of a past she wished away? Through my blurred tears, I noticed something tucked behind the boxes, a dusty old suitcase. I hadn't used it in 20 years, not since Claire's father was alive and we used to dream about traveling together. For the first time in decades, I wondered what would happen if I actually packed that suitcase, if I just went somewhere, anywhere, someplace where I wasn't defined only as someone's forgotten mother. Days turned into weeks, and I began to see my relationship with Claire through a clearer, harder lens. This hadn't started at the wedding. It had been happening slowly for years, so gradually that I never noticed the pattern forming. One rainy afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by old photo albums and birthday cards. The story was right there, written in fading ink. Claire at 16, rolling her eyes as I took her prom picture. Claire at graduation, standing just far enough away to keep distance in the photo. The birthday cards that had once said, "I love you, Mommy," had turned into store-bought cards with only her signature inside. The wedding had simply been the ending of a story that began long before. I traced a photo from Claire's 25th birthday, a dinner I'd saved for months to host at her favorite restaurant. In the picture, she sat surrounded by friends, while I was on the edge of the frame, half cropped out. Even then, she had already started placing me at the margins of her life. The doorbell rang, breaking my thoughts. Through the peephole, I saw my neighbor Evelyn, silver hair, kind eyes, holding a plate covered with a towel. "I brought cinnamon rolls," she said when I opened the door. "Still warm." I hesitated, embarrassed by my tear-streaked face, but her gentle concern softened me. "Come in," I said quietly, "though I'm not the best company today." Evelyn set the pastries on the counter, her gaze falling on the photo albums spread across the table. "Family memories?" she asked. "More like family illusions," I said, surprised by the sharpness in my own voice. She didn't respond right away, just poured 2 cups of tea and waited. And somehow, that silence opened the floodgates. I told her everything, the wedding, the whispers, the photos, the years of slow distance. When I finally stopped, my voice was trembling. I gave her everything, I said, and somehow it was never enough. Or maybe it was too much. Evelyn handed me a steaming mug. "My Harold used to say," she began softly, "that love shouldn't make you smaller. It should give you space to grow." I think I made myself smaller to give Claire more room, I admitted. But instead of noticing the space, she just filled it until there was nothing left for me. I looked around at the photos, the tokens of a life centered entirely on her, a life that had slowly erased me. "I don't even know who I am without her," I whispered. "Maybe it's time to find out," Evelyn said gently, her words landing like quiet truth. That evening, after she left, my phone rang. Claire's name appeared on the screen. For a moment, I almost didn't answer, afraid of more accusations, more disappointment. But old habits die hard. I picked up. "Mom," she said, her voice measured, that tone she used when she wanted something. "I've been thinking about what you said." Hope stirred faintly in my chest. "Yes?" I asked. "About the wedding money," she continued. "I know you worked hard for it, and I appreciate it. Really." For a moment I let myself believe she truly meant it, that maybe finally she understood. Then she continued, her voice measured but expectant. "So I was thinking, since you've always been so good with money, maybe you could help us with the down payment for the house we're looking at. Jason's parents are contributing, but we're still about $40,000 short." Her words hit harder than I could have imagined. After everything, the wedding, the silence, the cold call, she was asking me for more money. "Claire," I began carefully, "I don't have $40,000. The wedding and the honeymoon used most of my savings." "But what about your retirement fund?" she pressed. "Or maybe you could take a small home equity loan. The interest rates are great right now." I closed my eyes, and in that moment, the truth of our relationship became painfully, unmistakably clear. This wasn't love. It was transaction. "Why don't you come over for dinner this weekend?" I said, choosing my words slowly. "We could talk about your housing options face to face." Claire hesitated. "This weekend's tricky. We're having people over, the dinner party with the wedding photos." The same dinner I knew I wouldn't be invited to. The silence between us grew heavy. "Mom, don't be like that," she said finally. "It's just, Jason's parents are very particular, and they've been so generous. We need to make a good impression." "More particular?" I asked quietly. "Than the mother who raised you alone for 20 years? Who put you through college? Who just paid for your entire wedding?" "That's different," Claire said sharply. "You're my mother. You're supposed to do those things." The line went still. Her words hung between us, cold and final. To her, everything I had ever done, every sacrifice, wasn't a gift of love. It was duty, expected, taken for granted. "I have to go," I said softly. "We'll talk another time." "But Mom, about the house." I ended the call. My hands were shaking. Across the room my eyes fell once again on that old suitcase. Next to it were the boxes of Claire's childhood keepsakes, the things I had saved while quietly boxing up my own dreams. A strange calm settled over me. For decades, I had lived as though my only worth was in what I could provide. I had accepted being pushed out of photos, out of moments, out of her life entirely. The pattern was clear now. Claire would keep taking until there was nothing left, not my savings, not my home, not even my sense of self. For the first time, I asked myself the question I'd been too afraid to face since the wedding. What would happen if I stopped giving? What would be left of our relationship if I offered nothing but love, and not money? And even more terrifying, who would I be if I wasn't defined by her anymore? I stood and walked to the suitcase, running my hand across its worn leather handle. It had been my husband's. "One day," he used to say, "we'll show Claire the world." He never got the chance, but maybe there was still time for me. The real estate agent sounded surprised when I called. "You want to sell? But Mrs. Wilson, you've lived in that house for over 30 years. "Exactly," I said, looking around the room that held a lifetime of memories. "It's time for a change." In the 2 weeks since that final call with Claire, I'd made more decisions than in the last 5 years combined. The first was accepting Evelyn's invitation to join her book club. The second was meeting with a financial advisor to finally understand where I stood after the wedding. And the third, the most liberating, was listing my house for sale. "I'll need something smaller," I told the agent. "A place that's just right for me. Just for me." The words felt strange on my tongue, almost daring, as if I were doing something selfish. But as soon as I said them, something inside me loosened. The process moved quickly, the market was strong, and my well-kept colonial with its big garden received multiple offers within days. I accepted one well above asking price with a flexible closing date, enough time to find my next home. I hadn't told Claire. Every time I reached for the phone, I stopped. Maybe it was the memory of her asking for $40,000. Or maybe I just knew she'd see this decision only in terms of how it affected her, not as my right to finally live for myself. "You look different," Evelyn said one evening as we sat together on my porch after book club. The others had already left, but she stayed behind, sensing I needed to talk. "Different how?" I asked. "Lighter," she said with a soft smile. "Like you've put down something heavy you didn't even realize you were carrying." I smiled back, realizing she was right. With every step toward independence, the constant pressure, Claire's approval, her expectations, the endless calculations of how to make her dreams possible, was fading. "I found a condo," I told Evelyn, "near the lake. It has a small garden terrace and a view of the water." "Oh, it sounds perfect," she said, then paused. "Have you told Claire?" I shook my head. "Not yet. She hasn't called since she asked for money for the house. I think she's waiting for me to call back, with a yes and a check." Evelyn nodded slowly. "And when she finds out you're selling?" The question lingered in the night air between us. We both already knew the answer. "She'll be angry," I admitted to Evelyn one evening, "not because she wants me to keep the house, but because she's always assumed it would be hers someday." The weekend before I was set to sign the final papers, I decided Claire needed to hear it from me directly, not through gossip or by spotting a sold sign in my yard. I called her on a quiet Sunday morning, hoping to catch her before she and Jason left for brunch with his parents. "Mom, is everything okay?" she asked, her tone sharp with surprise. She never called me without a reason, but she always expected I'd call her. "Everything's fine," I said. "I just wanted to tell you about a decision I've made. I'm selling the house." There was a long pause. "What? Why would you do that?" "It's too big for one person," I explained. "Too many rooms to clean, too much yard to take care of." All true, just not the whole truth. I could almost hear her thinking on the other end, calculating. "Where will you go?" "I've bought a condo near Lakeview Drive," I said. "It's lovely, Claire. You should come see it sometime." Another silence. "But what about— we always talked about—" She couldn't even finish the sentence. I knew what she meant. She had counted on inheriting this house, had probably already pictured it as her own. "This is what's best for me right now," I said gently but firmly. "Is this because I asked about the down payment?" Her voice shifted into that wounded tone I knew too well. "Are you punishing me?" "No, Claire, this isn't about you at all. That's the point." "What's that supposed to mean?" The hurt vanished, replaced by irritation. "It means I'm finally making choices based on what I need," I said calmly, "not on what you expect." After a long silence, she spoke again, defensive now. "After everything we've been through, you're just going to—" "Claire," I interrupted, surprising even myself, "I paid for your wedding. I was excluded from your photos. I was told to wait in the kitchen. Then you called me asking for more money, without a single word about how I was treated." "That's not fair," she protested. "The photos were Jason's parents' idea and you went along with it," I finished quietly. "Just like you've gone along with pushing me further and further out of your life, except when you needed something." My voice wasn't angry, it was steady, honest. The line went quiet. For a moment, I thought she'd hung up. Then, softly, "I need to go. Jason's waiting." "Of course," I said. "But Claire, the sale closes next month. If there are any childhood things you want, you should come get them soon." "Fine," she said flatly, and the call ended. I set the phone down, expecting guilt to rise up inside me, but it didn't. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. For the first time, I had spoken my truth without bending it into something Claire wanted to hear. 3 days later, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Claire and Jason on the porch. She looked tense. He looked uneasy. I took a breath and opened the door. "I came for my things," Claire said without greeting. "Hello to you too," I replied softly, stepping aside. Jason gave a small, polite smile. "Hi, Mrs. Wilson. Nice to see you." Claire brushed past us and headed straight for the attic. "I'll need help with the boxes," she called over her shoulder. Jason followed her upstairs obediently. I stayed in the living room, listening to their footsteps above, the thud of boxes, the rustle of old papers. An hour later, they came down Jason carrying the last box. He took it to the car while Claire lingered, her eyes scanning the room as if seeing it for the first or last time. "So, you're really doing this?" she asked, her voice quieter now, but still edged with disbelief. "Yes," I said simply. "What if I needed to move back home someday?" she blurted out. "What if something happened with Jason and me?" Her question told me everything. In her mind, I was still the safety net, the backup plan, the place to land when life went wrong. "You're an adult, Claire," I said gently. "If something happened, you'd figure it out, just like I did when your father passed." Her eyes widened slightly, as if she'd never considered what that had really meant. How I'd been 35, widowed overnight, raising her alone with nothing but stubborn hope. "It's not the same," she said stiffly. "No," I agreed. "It's not. You have a degree, a career, and a family that seems eager to support you. I had none of those things." Jason reappeared in the doorway. "That's the last of the boxes," he said quietly. Claire gave a small nod, then turned back to me. "When you're older and need help," she said, "don't expect me to have room for you." The words were sharp, delivered with a chilling calm. I looked at her, my beautiful, accomplished daughter, and felt not anger but sorrow. Sorrow for what she'd become, or maybe for what I had helped her become. "I never would," I said softly. My new condo felt like a sanctuary. Bright and open, with wide windows overlooking the lake. It was nothing like the shadowed colonial where I had spent 3 decades trying to be everything for someone else. I kept only what brought me peace: my husband's old record player, my favorite books, and the quilt my grandmother made long ago. For the first time in years, the silence around me didn't feel empty. It felt free. The rest I had donated or sold. Each item I let go of felt like another step toward freedom. 1 month into my new life, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Evelyn usually called before dropping by, and I hadn't made many other friends in the building yet. Through the peephole, I froze. Claire stood there beside Jason, and behind them were his parents, the ones from the wedding photos. I hesitated, then opened the door. "Claire, this is a surprise." "May we come in?" she asked, her tone unusually formal. "Of course." I stepped aside, watching as they entered, each one wearing an expression that told me this was no casual visit. Claire's eyes swept across my condo, her expression carefully polite but unmistakably critical. "It's cozy," she said finally, the kind of word people use when they really mean small. "Thank you, I like it." I gestured to the sofa and chairs. "Please, have a seat. Tea, anyone?" "No need," said Richard, her father-in-law, briskly. "This isn't exactly a social call." I raised an eyebrow but sat across from them. "Then what brings you all here?" Claire and Jason exchanged a look before she began. "Mom, we've been talking and we're a little concerned about your recent decisions." "My decisions?" "Selling the family home," she clarified. "Moving here, it all feels impulsive." "It wasn't impulsive at all," I said evenly. "I thought about it for a long time." Elizabeth, Jason's mother, leaned forward, hands folded neatly in her lap. "Mrs. Wilson, what Claire is trying to say is that we're worried about your financial future. Selling your biggest asset at your age is concerning." My age again. As if being 68 meant I'd lost the ability to manage my own life. I appreciate your concern, I said, though I didn't, but my finances are in order. Are they? Richard asked, his tone skeptical. From what Claire tells us, you spent quite a bit on the wedding and then immediately sold your home. That sounds like financial strain. I looked at Claire. She blushed faintly, but said nothing to correct him. I'm not in financial distress, I said firmly. I sold my house because it was too large for one person and required maintenance I no longer wanted to manage. Well, that's exactly our point, Jason said quickly. You're not getting any younger, Margaret. Eventually, you'll need help. And we've come up with a solution, Claire added. I waited, already knowing where this was going. We think you should sign over your remaining assets to us, Claire said in that careful, reasonable tone she always used when she wanted something big. In return, we'll make sure you're cared for the rest of your life. I stared at her, speechless for a moment. It makes perfect sense, Elizabeth chimed in. You wouldn't have to worry about finances or medical decisions. Claire and Jason would handle everything. And once we buy a new property, Richard added, you could move into the guest house. It would be ideal. The four of them looked at me expectantly, waiting for gratitude, as if they'd just offered me the greatest gift imaginable. Let me be sure I understand, I said slowly. You want me to sign over all my assets, my savings, my investments, even this condo, to Claire and Jason. And in exchange, I get to live in their future guest house and depend on them for care. Exactly, Claire said, relieved I'd caught on. It's the perfect solution. And whose idea was this? I asked quietly. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. We all discussed it, Jason said. But who suggested it first? I pressed. Claire hesitated, then sighed. I did, but Mom, it's for your own good. You're not thinking clearly lately. I couldn't help it. I laughed, not cruelly, but incredulously. Not thinking clearly? Because I made choices you don't like? Because you're making rash financial moves, Richard cut in. The house sale, this condo. Ah, I said, nodding. So what you're really worried about is that if I keep making these rash decisions, there won't be anything left for Claire to inherit. The silence that followed said everything. That's not fair, Claire protested weakly. Isn't it? I asked, meeting her eyes. You were counting on my house. When I sold it, you weren't concerned for me. You were upset that the asset you expected was gone. And now you're here, trying to secure what's left. Mrs. Wilson, Elizabeth began, her voice taking on that gentle, patronizing tone. Families look out for one another. We're simply trying to protect everyone's interests. Everyone's interests, I repeated. Or just Claire and Jason's? They're the same thing, Richard said firmly. What benefits them benefits you. I stood up, suddenly tired. No, they're not the same, I said quietly. And I think it's time for you all to leave. Claire's face flushed red. So that's it? You won't even consider what's best for this family? This isn't about what's best for the family, I replied, my voice steady. It's about what's best for me, and that terrifies you. Mom, I've spent my entire life putting you first, Claire. I worked 2 jobs so you could go to private school. I postponed retirement to pay for your college. I drained my savings for your wedding. A wedding where I was hidden in the kitchen because I didn't fit the aesthetic. The words poured out, calm but certain, not as blame, but as truth. And now, when I finally begin living for myself, you arrive with your in-laws to tell me I'm incapable and should hand over everything I own. I shook my head slowly. No, not anymore. The room went still. No one spoke. Then, without another word, they stood and left. When the door clicked shut behind them, I took a deep breath and looked around my little condo, the soft light spilling through the windows, the quiet hum of the lake beyond. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I wasn't someone's safety net or someone's source of funding. I was simply me, and that was enough. You're being unreasonable, Claire snapped, the mask of concern finally slipping to reveal the entitlement beneath. Am I asked quietly. Or am I finally being reasonable, for the first time in my life? Richard stood, his expression hard. I can see this was a mistake. Come, Elizabeth. As they moved toward the door, Jason hesitated. Margaret, he said awkwardly, please think about our offer, for Claire's sake. I met his gaze steadily. That's all I've ever done, Jason. Think about Claire's sake. But not this time. When the door closed behind them, I walked to the window. Outside, I watched their sleek car pull away. I waited for the guilt to come, but it didn't. Instead, I felt an unfamiliar lightness, as if the last chain tying me to my old life had finally snapped. On my coffee table sat a brochure I'd been too nervous to open before, European River Cruises for Solo Travelers. I picked it up, and somehow I already knew what my next chapter would be. 1 year later, I celebrated my 69th birthday on the balcony of my condo, surrounded by friends, real friends, people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give. Evelyn was there, of course, along with 3 women from my book club, 2 neighbors from the building, and Thomas, the kind widower I'd met 6 months earlier on that very river cruise I'd once only dreamed about. Make a wish, Margaret, Evelyn urged as she placed the cake before me. A simple lemon confection from the local bakery, not the extravagant kind Claire would have insisted upon. I smiled, closed my eyes, and realized there wasn't much left to wish for. For the first time in decades, I felt whole, content, grounded, alive in my own story. When I opened my eyes, Thomas caught my gaze and smiled warmly across the table. We weren't rushing anything. We'd both lived enough life to understand that love doesn't need to hurry. His quiet presence was a gift I hadn't known I was missing. Speech. E called Martha from book club, raising her glass. I laughed and shook my head. No speeches, just, thank you all for being here. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined this. And it was true. A year ago, I was defined entirely by one role, Claire's mother. A role that had consumed me until there was almost nothing left. Now, I was Margaret Wilson, reader, traveler, volunteer, and woman finally living her own story. The afternoon passed in a blur of laughter and light conversation. When my guests left, hugs, promises, and the scent of lemon frosting lingering, Thomas stayed behind to help me tidy up. You seem happy, he said as we washed the dishes side by side. I am, I replied, smiling. Happier than I've been in years. Any word from Claire? He asked gently. The question didn't sting anymore. No, I said. Not since everything. After our confrontation, she'd tried every tactic. Anger, guilt, even tears. When none of it worked, the calls stopped. The last I'd heard, she and Jason had bought a house in an exclusive neighborhood, thanks to his parents' generosity. I'm sorry, Thomas said softly, his sympathy sincere despite never having met her. Thank you, I said, but honestly, it's better this way. I searched for the right word. Our relationship had become toxic, he offered. I nodded. Yes, and one-sided. I kept pouring in, but nothing ever came back. He dried the last plate, setting it carefully in the cupboard. Some relationships are like that, he said, like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. We moved out to the balcony where the setting sun turned the lake into ripples of gold and rose. In that quiet, I thought about how far I'd come, the trip to Europe I'd always dreamed of, the watercolor classes I'd finally started, the evenings spent helping adults learn to read at the literacy center. My life had grown wider, brighter, fuller, and for the first time, it belonged completely to me. The doorbell rang, breaking the peace. Thomas raised an eyebrow. Expecting anyone? No, I said, puzzled. Probably a neighbor. When I opened the door, I froze. It was Claire. She looked thinner, paler, her perfect composure slightly frayed, as if she'd made the decision to come at the last minute. Mom, she said quietly. Claire, I replied, surprised but calm. This is unexpected. Her eyes drifted past me, landing on Thomas out on the balcony. Oh, you have company. I can come back. No, it's fine. I hesitated for just a moment, then stepped aside. "Would you like to come in?" She stepped inside cautiously, like a traveler entering a foreign country, unsure of the customs, unsure of her welcome. I introduced her to Thomas, who greeted her kindly before saying with a smile, "I should get home to my dog." After he left, Claire glanced toward the door. "He seems nice," she said. "He is," I replied. "We met on my European cruise." Her eyebrows lifted. "You went to Europe?" "6 months ago," I said, smiling. "A Rhine River cruise. It was wonderful." Claire looked around my condo, taking in everything that had changed, the bright paintings on the walls, the shelves filled with books I'd finally had time to read, and the photographs from my travels displayed proudly where old family portraits used to hang. "You've been busy," she said. "Yes," I answered simply. An uneasy silence settled between us. Then Claire reached into her purse and handed me an envelope. "I came to give you this," she said. Inside was a store-bought birthday card, but this time she'd written something more than a signature. "Mom, I've been doing a lot of thinking. The past year has changed how I see things. Jason and we're not together anymore. His parents decided I wasn't suitable after all. I know I've treated you terribly. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to wish you a happy birthday and tell you that I'm trying to understand where I went wrong." When I looked up from the card, she was watching me nervously, and for the first time in years, I saw something fragile in her expression, something that reminded me of the little girl she once was. "I'm sorry about Jason," I said quietly, and I meant it. She shrugged, attempting casualness, but failing. "It turns out they only approved of me when they thought I came with a big inheritance. When that didn't happen..." Her voice trailed off. "That must have been painful," I said gently. Claire nodded, her composure slipping. "The thing is," she admitted, "they treated me exactly how I treated you, like I was only valuable for what I could provide." Our eyes met, and for the first time in years, there was no pretense between us. "It made me see what I'd become," she whispered. I gestured toward the sofa. "Would you like some tea? Or maybe cake? It's lemon, your favorite when you were little." A flicker of surprise crossed her face. "You still remember that?" "Some things don't change," I said softly. We sat together with tea and cake, our conversation hesitant at first, then gradually easier. She told me about her divorce, her new apartment, and how she'd started therapy, reluctantly but sincerely. I told her about the cruise, my volunteer work, my watercolor classes. There were pauses, moments when old wounds hovered between us, but there was also something new, honesty. And perhaps the beginning of understanding. As she stood to leave, Claire hesitated. "I don't expect things to go back to how they were," she said. "I know I've done too much damage." "Things can't go back," I replied gently. "I'm not the same person I was a year ago." She nodded, accepting that truth. "Could I call you sometimes? Maybe we could have coffee now and then?" I thought for a long moment. The old me would have agreed instantly, eager for any scrap of connection, but I'd learned the value of boundaries, the peace that comes from protecting your own heart. "I'd like that," I said finally. "But Claire, it has to be different, equal. I can't go back to being just a resource for you." "I understand," she said quietly. "I don't expect that. I just want to know who you are now." After she left, I returned to the balcony. The lake shimmered beneath a sky dusted with stars. I didn't know if Claire's change would last, if it came from true reflection or simply from tasting what she once made me feel. But I knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next, I would face it as the woman I had become. A woman who valued herself, who knew her worth beyond what she could give. My phone buzzed with a message from Thomas. "Hope everything went okay. Still on for the gallery tomorrow?" I smiled and typed back, "Yes. Looking forward to it." In the glass of the balcony door I caught my reflection, shoulders straight, eyes bright, a calm smile playing on my lips. Not just Claire's mother. Not a wallet. Not an afterthought. Margaret Wilson, whole, seen, finally standing at her own place in the world. The invisible woman from that wedding kitchen was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who had finally claimed her seat at life's table. Now I'm curious about you, the one watching this. What would you have done if you were in my place? Have you ever had to choose yourself after years of being someone else's support? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone, and before you go, I've left 2 more stories waiting for you on the screen. True favorites from this channel that will definitely surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until the end, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next story.